Wes, let's start with the Florida Atlantic Owls. Dusty May is the coach. You know very well. Rick Barnes has had plenty of failures in March, but no March misery this time for the Vols, unless they fall short in this game. Then it's going to be same old Rick Barnes.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee used bully ball play. They were too physical for Duke in round 2. They knocked around Duke's freshmen, and the Duke freshmen did not respond well to the physical nature of the game. What's Florida Atlantic's path to victory here as a 5.5-point underdog? The total has ticked up from 130.5 to 132 here at Circus Sports.
Yeah, and look, I like Rick Barnes, too. I always have. He just has been snake bit in the tournament, and a lot of coaches fall into that. But this guy's won everywhere he's been. I don't think he's a bad coach by any stretch of the imagination. Seen this kind of go back and forth to 5 and 5.5. I think there were some 5s mostly this morning, then went back to 5.5. That's pretty much the market consensus out there. I know DraftKings still at 5, but just looking at some of the metrics, I think Ken Pom made Tennessee 4, Bartorvik made Tennessee 5.5. So, I mean, look, you're not going to get a lot of variance in terms of what the odds are that are set out there with the various metric sites and whatnot. But yeah, you're right about Tennessee, and that's what eventually led me to be on them for small on Saturday. It was kind of like just playing against recency bias because Duke looks so good and Tennessee looks so awful. Look, I laid it with Tennessee on Thursday night, up 18. It's like game's over. And all ULL did was hit a couple threes, and they got right back in it, and Tennessee had to survive late, 58-55. And really it was the kid Vescovi got in foul trouble, and he only had 3 points in that first game. But in the second game against Duke, he was way more active and a way better scorer in that game. So, I believe he had 14, 4 3 from the 3. And I thought Tennessee, you could call it maybe a dirty play from the kid Plavsic, who's the big center for Tennessee, who knocked over Filipowski. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was sending a message. And
I don't mind it.
And they sent a message early.
Hey, this is win or go home. Send a message. Knock people around.
That's what
I
they did.
See. I like the way Tennessee played.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did. And Duke, I don't think, was really prepared for that type of physicality.
Duke got punked. They got punked in that game.
And Tennessee, by the way, number 1 currently in adjusted defensive efficiency, number 3 in effective field goal percentage, number 1 still in three-point shooting, 26.4%. They were like 22% last month, which would have been like the all-time NCAA record. So they regressed from that standpoint. But, the draw now, you got to think, is kind of opened up for them at least. But we've seen teams have a draw open before. The one in West Lafayette we were talking about earlier certainly comes to mind in that East region here in Madison Square Garden. And you've got 4 teams from like all over. You don't have an East Coast team here. You got FAU, you've got Tennessee, Michigan State, Kansas State, which we'll get to momentarily. But I think what FAU needs to do is really do what they've been doing, because I think one of the reasons they started so slow against what was an inferior opponent in FDU is because all of a sudden you're the underdog. You're the team that, people have taken notice of. You've won over 30 games, and you are the underdog, even though you're a very small underdog against Memphis. And now you're playing the ultimate underdog, and all of a sudden the crowd's cheering against you. Mm-hmm. That were maybe with you on Friday night. They weren't with you on Sunday night. So, all of a sudden these guys aren't used to it. I mean, even not being used to just being on this stage. The kid that got interviewed by Jamie Erdahl after the game that let the S-bomb go, not used to it. Not used to being on this stage. So
John L. Davis, 29 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists. He was outstanding in that game. And he's from Gary, Indiana, by the way. Mm-hmm. Indiana ties, which I know you love here because you've got Dusty May with an Indiana Hoosier connection and John L. Davis from Gary. And he was a stud in that game, and he's the reason Florida Atlantic took out Fairleigh Dickinson, 29 points, and the Owls hit 9 of 31 threes. I think they're going to have to shoot better. It's going to be tough because Tennessee's so good.
Because they take away that three-point line.
At the three-point line, but I think Florida Atlantic's going to have to hit about 10 threes to pull off the win in this game.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the recipe for the underdog. But I do lean FAU, at least at this stage.
I do, too. I like Florida Atlantic here plus 5.5. And I think you're betting against a Tennessee team that's just off its A game, right? Mm-hmm. Which I like to. You said it. And the Vols probably played their C game or C-minus game in the first round. Then they played their A game against Duke. I expect a little regression.
And they get scoring droughts at very inopportune times.
No doubt. And you don't want to lay points with a team like that. Florida Atlantic is our preferred side in that game.
Visit VSiN.com to get current odds, listen for free, find showtimes, and download VSiN sports betting podcasts.